Welcome to Coach Bennett's podcast, where every run has a purpose, where kindness is hardcore, where this is about running, and this is not about running, where every starting line is a finish line in disguise, where rambling still gets you where you need to be, where pineapple will never ruin your pizza, and the sodas, adult and not adult kind, are always cold, and where there is room on the starting line for everybody. I'm Coach Bennett. Thank you for letting me be a part of your day. Let's get started. Well, hello everybody, and welcome to episode 121 of Coach Bennett's podcast. This one is entitled Ready, Set, Go, and it's going to be a good one for a couple of reasons. I mean, the topic, when I get into that, you're going to love it. And two, I'm traveling, and we all know that when I travel and I have to record remotely, the episodes, well, they rock. They're fantastic. They're stone cold great. And this one is going to be all those things because we get to talk about how to coach kids. Now, here's the cool thing. So many of you have been asking for an episode about this, which makes me so happy because when we share the sport, we save the sport. And when we share the sport with kids, we are saving the sport forever, because they are the ones that are going to take the batons from us and they're going to pass them on to the next generation after them. That's how we make this a lifelong sport for everyone. The key, though, is that you introduce the sport the right way. You make sure that these new athletes, these young athletes, experience success. They learn how to run the right way, the best way for them. They have fun. We want to make sure that they play running because this is a sport you can play forever. So thank you for everyone reaching out and saying, hey, can you do an episode on coaching kids, on introducing the sport to kids, on how you can get kids to move, be active, and start running. So I have all of you to blame for this wonderful episode. Now, what makes this episode even better is that we're refreshing. Or is it going to be version 2.0? Maybe it's the remix. Anyway, we're coming out again with a brand new, refreshed, remixed version 2.0 of the Ready, Set, Go guide at Nike. Now, some of you may remember, this is about 10 years ago. We put together a Ready, Set, Go guide for parents, coaches, volunteers, people that worked with the youth on how you can introduce the sport to kids. I had a really great time putting this together, and just recently I worked with a group, an awesome group of people at Nike to reimagine this guide. So it's coming out. I'm going to put a link in the show notes where you can download the guide. They're also going to be making hard copies of it, which is awesome. For me, I like holding what I'm reading. You know what I mean? I don't know if you're like that, but I'm like that. Like I got to hold the book if I'm going to read it. And I'm also old school. When I used to teach, I know this is just the first of many rambles today. When I used to teach, I didn't let kids bring a computer into class. Now remember, I taught history, which is storytelling. You don't really need your computer. You just need to listen. And occasionally write down some important points that I will stress, probably because I say, now that's really important, or I get really excited and my voice cracks or something like that. So the kids knew what was very important. But the point is, because I just wanted them to listen, experience it, and then write down what was important. Now the cool thing here is, since we're coming out with a hard copy of the Ready, Set, Go, Run guide, there's also parts in there that are going to engage the young athlete. So not only do they get to experience the run, they get to learn about running, and they get to learn about themselves as a runner. There are questions in there. There's cool little facts in there. There's, breaking down some of the parts about running that people get wrong, celebrating the greatest parts about this sport, and there are opportunities for the young athlete to acknowledge and appreciate the progression and the success that they're experiencing in their running. So it's kind of like a JV version of, a running journal without being a running journal. And it's super fun. The colors are awesome. Anyway, it's really, really great. And I'm also going to mention this probably a few times throughout this conversation. There are kind of like parallel stories being told in this Ready, Set, Go guide, which, yes, there's a digital version, and like I said, there's a hard copy version. But it's not just for the young athlete. It's going to also be for that adult that's working with them, that adult that is going to be acting really as a coach for this athlete, that person that is going to be introducing this sport to that athlete. Because it's really important that the introduction is done the right way. It's really important that that person that is introducing this sport and guiding this athlete through the early stages of getting to know this sport understands what the real purpose is with what they're doing, understands how they should be acting with this athlete on this journey, how they can support the athlete, how they can celebrate the athlete, because that's what we want. We want these young kids to have fun. We want them to experience success. We want them to feel celebrated. We want them to come back to another starting line excited to go on this journey, because this is about running and this is not about running. Now, I just also want to say this. The way that you introduce the sport to a young athlete is the same way you introduce the sport to an adult. Now, maybe the language is a little bit different. Maybe, if you go through the guide, the colors and the characters might be a little bit different for an adult. I will just say this. Adults, get over yourself. It doesn't need to be different. You still love the wild colors and you still love the crazy characters. Just be honest. There's probably a part of you that understands that the best part of you is still 16 or 17, right? Optimistic, dreaming, passionate, willing to get on a starting line and enjoying the fact that there are butterflies in your life. So, as just a little something to think about as we go through some of the basic tenets of the Ready, Set, Go guide and how to introduce the sport to a young athlete. I just want you to remember, if you feel like you're low on inspiration, if you feel like you're low on motivation, if you're wondering, do you really want to go for a run, or are you falling out of love with running? Is that possible? Go back to these basic parts that we talk about, these fundamentals that you're going to be going over with a young athlete or a new athlete, and realize maybe you need to come back to the beginning, come back to that earliest starting line, and realize what you need now is what you've always needed from the sport, right? I mean, let's talk about it. I mean, was it 2 minutes ago I said we want these athletes to experience success? I want them to play running. I want them to have fun, feel celebrated. Well, that's what we need too when we take part in this sport. So let's get going, shall we? Now, the first thing that we do, which should be no surprise to anyone, is we go for a run. Now, here's the thing. The purpose of that first run with a new athlete is nothing else other than, let's just run. Let's just go for a run. It's not going to be very long. It's not going to go very far. We're not going to run even very fast. We're just going to go for a run. And we're probably going to finish before you even want to finish. We're just going to realize that we can go for a run, and we can decide when we stop. And when we go for a run, it doesn't need to exhaust us. It doesn't need to overly fatigue us. It doesn't need to be difficult. It doesn't need to be hard. What we need to do is just run. And the difference between a run and a walk, it's not about pace. It's not about distance. It's not about duration. It's about flight. It's about leaving the ground, both feet at the same time, and coming back down and then taking off again. That's it. So we're just going to go for a couple of little flights, and it's only going to be a couple minutes long. And the reason why we're doing this is because oftentimes a young athlete, a new athlete to our sport, they can believe they're not good enough. Or maybe they've heard from other people that running is so difficult, running is so hard. And this is the first disconnect that we want to fix. Because these young athletes, they run. They run on the playground. They run to the bus stop. They run through the hallways. They run around the pool. They run on the beach. They run around their block. They run through backyards. Now, they often hear parents tell them, stop running. And then they have to stop running. So, one of the first things they realize is, geez, parents don't like when we run. We're going to fix that. But the other thing is, they've now disconnected that form of play with the sport of running. And they shouldn't. We're the only sport that does that. We're the only sport that says, hey, you can play basketball on the playground. You can play football. You can play tennis. But then there's this other version of it, the sport version of it, and it ceases to be play. No, you just continue to play tennis. You go to your first school practice for basketball. You're still playing basketball. For some reason in running, we make it serious. You go from running around the playground, which we just call playing, running around your backyard, which we just call playing, running around the beach, oh, look, they're just playing, to suddenly going to practice for running, and now it's just running and no longer playing. What we want to do is keep those two terms together. They should be. We're going to play running. And I want you to start using that in your vocabulary. When you talk to your young athlete, when you talk to this new runner, I want you to say, hey, you want to go play running? Because it's just going to change the vibe of what you're doing. And sometimes that's all it takes to get someone to do something, is change the vibe. I'll give you an example here. One of my favorite pieces of writing ever about coaching really isn't about coaching. It's one of the chapters in The Adventures of Tom Sawyer by Mark Twain. Now, Tom gets punished by his aunt, and he has to whitewash the fence. He has to paint the fence. It's a punishment. It's not fun. I think it's a Saturday, too, so it's the day that, as he puts it, he's free to do whatever he wants to do. He doesn't have to go to school. Maybe he's going to go down to the pond and swim, or he's just going to go get in trouble with some of his buddies. But no, not this Saturday. He has to paint both sides of the fence. So he goes out there and he starts painting the fence, and he's not having a good time. And, next thing you know, one of his buddies starts coming up the road, and he gets this idea. And his buddy starts making fun of him. Oh, look what you need to do. You need to paint this fence. Oh, that looks terrible. And Tom goes, are you kidding me? This is great. I wouldn't want to do anything else on a Saturday but paint this fence. This is amazing. And I get to get the paint on the brush. And here I go, oh, look at this. I'm putting the paint on the fence. This is the best. And his buddy starts thinking, you got to be kidding me. Tom's like, no, I don't want to go swimming. I don't want to go get in trouble. All I want to do is paint this fence. This is the best. Now, suddenly his friend is intrigued and says, well, let me try. And Tom's like, no way. I'm not going to let you try. This is so much fun. Why would I share this fun with you? His friend's like, come on. I'll give you a marble. And Tom's like, fine, just for a minute. So then the kid starts painting the fence, and the kid's like, yeah, this is great. And then another kid comes up, and suddenly he's like, why are you making, I forget the dude's name, Billy paint the fence? And Billy's like, I don't have to paint the fence. This is amazing. And Tom's like, yeah, like you got to get out of here. You're not allowed to paint the fence. The kid's like, why am I not allowed to paint the fence? And he's like, well, it's too much fun. You're not allowed to paint the fence. So suddenly the kid's like, well, I want to paint the fence. Next thing you know, Tom has kids lined up giving him all sorts of treats and trinkets and little goodies for an opportunity just to paint the fence. And they're having a blast. And they're wiping up and down. And they're brushing up and down. And you know what? Lickety-split, that fence gets painted. Those kids had fun painting the fence. Now, the act of painting the fence did not change. Putting the brush into the white paint, painting the fence up and down, stroke after stroke, nothing changed other than the fact the vibe changed. Tom had changed the lighting a little bit, like if this was a movie set, and suddenly it looked dreary. He put the lights in a certain angle, and now it looks fun. That's what you want to do when you introduce the sport to someone.
any sport. If you want to get great at anything, you need to enjoy the process of getting great. Because if you don't, you're never going to get as great as you could. And that's what we're trying to do with this Ready, Set, Go guide. That's it. Can we introduce the sport the right way, a better way, a fun way, a way where you're not just running, you're playing running. And that's all that first run is. We're going to go out there, and you really want the athlete to walk away saying, that's it? Like, that's all it takes? Because what we're trying to do is introduce to the athlete the reality that they can do this. And so many don't think they can. And if you have an athlete that knows they can run, already enjoys the act of running, well, guess what? It's also important to introduce to them that not every time they run, they're going to end fatigued, exhausted, tired, wiped out. It doesn't always have to lead to that. Now, if you're someone who does run, you already know that. But it's important to introduce the concept to these kids that when they shift from running through the backyard, running around the beach to, hey, we're going to play running and take part in it as a sport, well, these concepts are really important. Because what you're doing is you're introducing the concept to not overtrain, right? Now, this isn't as big of a deal for someone who's 7 or 10 or 11, but it's really important for the parents and the coaches of the 7 and the 9 and the 10-year-olds. Because I'll tell you what, they're the ones that are going to overtrain the athlete. I've seen it. I've seen it too many times. And what happens is it ceases to become play, and now it becomes just slog and drudge. It's no longer fun when you're so tired and you don't want to go out and do it. We want athletes to always want to go out and play running. And in order to do that, we have to make sure that they're not being overtrained, that it's not becoming boring, it's not becoming tedious, because it shouldn't. Not for kids. Yes, there are times for young adults and adults when they're training that the training's not easy. That's just the reality of it. It can be very hard to stay inspired. It can be very difficult to be motivated. But I'll tell you what, when you're working with young kids, that shouldn't be a problem. They're not training to set records. They're not training so someday they can be in the Olympics. Because I'll tell you what, it's not the training that's going to get them to set records later in life. It's not the training when you're 7 or 9 or 10 or 12 that's going to get you to the Olympics 10, 15, 20 years later. It's going to be the fact that you fell in love with the sport. That's the key. If you want your athlete to have the best opportunity to stay in the sport, that gives them the best opportunity to progress in the sport, which then gives them the best opportunity to experience more and more success in the sport. You got to go all the way back to the beginning and make sure they love it. Make sure they're having fun. Make sure they're enjoying it. Make sure they want to come back and play running. And one other way of doing that, which you're going to see in the guide, is a real diversity in the types of running. If you just think about them playing outside and the way they run, we're really just mimicking that. There are times when they'll run for long stretches. Maybe they're playing a game like tag or something, or hide and seek, or they got to chase somebody, and maybe they have to run for a couple of minutes at a time. Okay, that takes some real endurance. There are other times when maybe they're just running in the backyard and it's stop and go, stop and go, stop and go. Well, that's kind of like intervals, isn't it? It is. And there are other times when they're running around and maybe they're playing, tag with lots of people, or we used to play running bases. My wife, Tammy, Coach Bennett the Greater, which she coached kids for 15 years. She had all sorts of games, like sharks and minnows and all sorts of different types of games that would mimic things like a fartlek run. So we may have fancy terms for what we do as adults, but really we're just mimicking types of play we did as kids. Yes, it may be more focused, right, as we get older. But if you lose the focus and you just get back to the spirit, you're really just playing. So what we want to do is let these kids know that every run isn't just for a duration or a distance. There's going to be stopping. There's going to be going. There's going to be different speeds. Sometimes it's going to get difficult, but not difficult in a way that makes you feel like you're not good enough. Difficult in a way that's exciting. Like, can I go further? How much faster can I go? Can I make it all the way to there? And regardless of the outcome, it's an opportunity to celebrate the effort, to celebrate the movement, to celebrate the simple act of running. Remember, this isn't a test. This isn't an exam. This isn't a measurement of greatness. Whether or not they can achieve a certain type of run, whether or not they can go a certain distance, whether or not they can run a certain speed, them showing up, taking part, having fun, and trying their best is a measurement of real greatness. Every athlete that shows up and tries their best should be celebrated. Now, this concept seems pretty straightforward and pretty obvious, but I'll tell you what, not every coach understands that. Some coaches or parents, whoever is guiding the athlete, sometimes think everything is about each day we're going to do a little bit more. Each day we're going to go a little bit further. Each day we should be getting a little bit faster. Well, that doesn't work. That's not how it operates. Even with adults, even with elite athletes, that's not how it goes. You don't have the top athletes running 500-kilometer runs because they've been running for 20 years and each day they decided to go a little bit further. That's not how it goes. We know the overwhelming majority of your training are supposed to be easy runs, recovery runs. We could just call them fun runs because in reality, that's what they're supposed to be. I mean, if you really want to recover your best in between your hard efforts, you should have fun runs. We can call them easy runs. We can call them recovery runs. They should be fun runs. I know it's semantics, but really, it's the vibes. If you head into a run and we started calling them fun runs, I think we'd probably have more fun. I call them easy runs and recovery runs, and the reason why I do that is because I want the athlete, usually adults or young adults, to remember the purpose of the run. But every once in a while, I'll sprinkle in there the fact that this is supposed to be a fun run. You should be enjoying it. It shouldn't be arduous to go out and do an easy run or a recovery run. Now, granted, yes, I understand sometimes you're tired from your day, right? Sometimes life is getting in the way. Sometimes the weather, like in the Pacific Northwest, it's just rained for 73 straight days in a row. It's tough to get motivated when it's dark at 3:30 p.m. to go out for a run. Now, I'm bringing all of this up because so often when we work with kids, we forget they have their lives too. We wonder, why don't you want to do this? Why isn't this fun for you today? Why are you quitting so early? Why do you want to give up? Well, it's the same reasons you do, old-timer. That's right. Do you think kids don't have their own lives? Do you think kids don't have an emotional roller coaster like adults do? Do you think kids don't experience stress? Do you think kids are always inspired or always motivated? They're not. Make sure you're giving these young athletes the same amount of grace that you deserve. And I'll tell you what, you deserve an awful lot of grace. Because life isn't easy. It doesn't matter if you're 7 years old or 70 years old. Life's tough. So make sure these moments, like a run, like a fartlek run, like some intervals, like an out and back little tempo, because we sneak these things in to the Ready, Set, Go Run guide. You should be sneaking these things in to your training. Make sure when you're taking on these little runs or big runs, make sure you're having fun. Make sure you're remembering the purpose of them. Make sure that if the day has been long, the day has been stressful, the day has been hard, the day has been tough, that this is something you look forward to. Or at least it's something that by the end of it, you feel better. Maybe in one way, maybe in countless ways. That's the same thing we want the athlete that you're working with, that young athlete, that kid, to experience in these runs. I'll tell you another reason why this is so important and why I'm so excited that we refreshed the Ready, Set, Go, Run guide. It's because more than ever, now, kids are struggling to get out and move. They're struggling to find excuses to go play. Their opportunities to do this are diminished compared to just a generation ago. And that has ramifications later on. If you are introduced to the joy of movement early in life, if you're introduced to being on teams, if you're introduced to the fun that being a part of a sport can be when you're younger, there are such positive ramifications later in life. And maybe there are times when you drift away from consistent movement and activity and sport. But having that initial relationship with it, it's like getting back on a bicycle. You can come back to another starting line. So remember, you're not just introducing playing running to a kid for just them while they're a kid. You're giving them an invitation to a starting line that never expires. They will have that invitation to a starting line for the rest of their lives. And if that invitation that they accepted as a kid led to something fun, something enjoyable, something that made them feel better about themselves, guess what? That is an invitation they will use again. And most importantly, it's an invitation that they know they can use again when they need it most. Because I'll tell you what, at some point, they're going to need it, just like we do. So remember, this guide, this introduction to the sport, if you're an adult that's doing this, it's a wonderful opportunity for you to go through the process again for yourself. But it's also really important that you remember it starts with, it's led with, it's in service of the kid. Make sure you realize this is for them. And it's not just for them right now, it's for them for the rest of their lives. And just like a great introduction, a wonderful experience is something that they can hold on to and take advantage of for the rest of their lives. The opposite is true too, which is why I wrote sections for the parents, the coaches, and that adult in those kids' lives that are going to be working with them with just as much thought, maybe even more thought, than I gave to the sections that are directed to the kids. Because I know a terrible experience can keep someone away from a starting line for the rest of their lives. So just remember that. Remember what the purpose of this is. Remember what the focus of this is. Remember who you are in service of, that young athlete. And I think that's why we originally made this years ago, and I think it's why we've brought it back. You know, that idea of powering the future of youth sport. I mean, that's one of the visions, when Nike came and said, let's do this, that was the primary focus. And I was like, okay, I can buy into that, right? With this vision of just an active, inclusive world, that inspires the youth to play and achieve. Like, oh, okay, let's give them an opportunity to reach their greatest potential. That was what the I'm not going to say the marching orders were. I think that was like, this is the vision. Can we help with this? And the answer was yes. And the way to do it is to make sure that not only do the kids have a fun introduction to the sport, it's also making sure that those who are introducing them to the sport know how to give them a fun introduction to the sport. So I would recommend all of you check it out. Check it out and share it. Share it. Like I told you at the very beginning, when we share the sport, we save the sport. And if we can share the sport with new runners, with young runners, with kids in a better way, a more inclusive way, a more positive way, a more intelligent way, and a more fun way, we have an opportunity to really change a generation. A generation right now that needs more coaches, because this generation needs more athletes. And I'm not talking about kids that have to be on a team or have to wear a jersey or have to, be stressed out about earning a medal. When I say be athletes, I mean be individuals that enjoy movement. Your real passion may be the arts, and that's wonderful. I'll tell you what, you will thrive in the arts even more if you're also physically active. Your passion may be mathematics. It may be the sciences. It may be writing. That is great. You may be a gamer. Fantastic. Okay? Support these kids and their passions. And one of the ways you can do that is by supporting them moving, staying physically active, experiencing success as a body in motion. If you can do that, whatever other passions they have in their life, they're going to experience in a more passionate way. There are lessons, life lessons you can learn through sport, and they are so valuable. I'm biased, believe me, I know, but it doesn't mean I'm wrong. This is an opportunity to introduce physical activity, movement, the sport of running. You can introduce the concept of playing running to a kid in your life, and they will benefit for the rest of their lives. So make sure you check out the Ready, Set, Go, Run guide. You can check it out at nike.com/coaching. I'll put a link on the show notes. I think it actually drops on October 1st. So if it's not initially there, just come back and hit the link. I will put it up there. You can check it out. And please, give me some stories. I want to hear about how you use the guide, how you use this podcast to introduce the sport to kids. I want to hear about some of the activities that you started with a young runner or a new runner or a kid because of this podcast or this Ready, Set, Go guide. I want to hear about what you think about, or more importantly, I should say, what the kid thinks about. I do care what you think. Believe me, you're very important, like I said. Maybe the most important coach in this kid's life because you may be their first coach. So I do want to hear what you think about the guide and the characters in there and the colors and some of the questions that we're asking and some of the facts that we're giving and the fun vibe that we've got going on there. I also want to hear what the young athlete and the kid thinks about it. Did they have fun? Are they asking themselves some of these questions? Are they making sure they're having fun? Do they feel more confident, more successful? Do they feel like the rock star that they are for having played some running? So let me know. Keep me updated, all right? And thank you, as always, for listening to the show. Thank you for being a part of the sport. Thank you for sharing the sport. Thank you for saving the sport. Now take care of yourself. Take care of each other. And I'll meet you on another starting line. Thank you so much for listening to Coach Bennett's podcast today. And if you haven't already subscribed or set yourself as a follower to the podcast, I really hope you would. And make sure you check out the show notes, because in those show notes, you're going to find a link to Coach Bennett's newsletter and all the social media sites I'm on, like Instagram and Threads and Cameo and Blue Sky and Nope, not on that one anymore. So all the ones I am on, you're going to find it in the show notes, so check that out as well. And as always, thank you again for listening to Coach Bennett's podcast. Until next time, you keep taking care of yourself and each other.